We just read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, my final Brandon Sanderson Cosmere book. I have now read everything. Jaden, I think you've got a couple more left.
I have a couple left, but I am proud of you for completing the set.
I am so excited. I've read everything the Cosmere. We're excited to talk about this book, dive right into it, and get our thoughts on Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
Let's dive right in.
Yeah, so this book, I will say right off the bat, gave me strong... This was... I've watched Korean shows on Netflix before, like a rom-com Korean type show.
Yeah.
And this feels like... I can't call it rom-com because it's not like a comedy. But it's like a romance. Korean romance meets Stranger Things.
Is it like a drama, like the telenovelas that they have, or whatever they're called?
So I have to step back. I've only seen a few of these shows, and I will have to say I did love it, though. So I watched the show. It was a rom-com. It was called Love to Hate You. It was a Korean show. Honestly, I have to say these Korean shows, I love them. I think that they have a style of acting that is just phenomenal, super interesting. They're over the top on purpose, which is really, really interesting. They'll do things that are just funny and like not believable for like the real world, but you can tell that they're doing it on purpose, which makes their acting like just so good and so great. So I had a great experience watching it. My wife loves watching them. And so like I watched this one with her. And I talked to some people at work, and this seems to be the theme with a lot of these Korean dramas and things like that. And just based off of my small experience, I could be wrong, maybe not the rest of them are like this. This felt like a Korean drama, which would make sense because Brandon Sanderson spent 2 years of his life in Korea, right? Yeah, so he definitely drew on those experiences, right?
Yeah.
But again, I will say this was a Korean drama with Stranger Things mix in it for me, which I loved all of that. Like it was just a cool combination for me.
That's a cool connection that I can't say that I had. I haven't seen those same dramas, but specifically the part that they watch those dramas throughout the book is probably kind of cool. It's probably very similar. I think the only experience that I have is just with like telenovelas in Spanish, usually like a full Mexican cast. And
do you watch those?
I don't watch them now, but they watch a ton of them in South America. And I spent 2 years in South America, so that was something that was like super popular. And one thing that I do remember about them is they are like so good at just engulfing you in like the story, because you're right, they're over the top. The acting is intense. It's constantly moving around, but also the sound design and the music design they have in those is actually really, really good.
Wow.
I just think they did a good job of like really captivating the audience, and I think that's what they do in the dramas in here. So
they do, and she even talks about that, right? Like
it's pretty
Yumi
cool.
Says like, we got to get to the next one.
Exactly.
Like, what
it's
happened?
Crazy how much that works.
Yeah. How could they just leave you right here in this moment?
Absolutely.
I laughed out loud a lot on those moments just because I'm like, that is pretty much every TV show, right?
Yeah, they try to be. Hey, some aren't. Some that we've reviewed on this channel have not cut that same cloth.
Right. Well, like so my wife and I'm rewatching Prison Break with her.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Except like Theodore Bagwell just drives me absolutely crazy. Cannot stand him as a character.
It's like Ana Lucia in Lost.
Yeah, except on a different level because
that's true. That's true.
Bagwell's just a horrible person. But it comes back to, I will rewatch shows if I'm watching it with someone for their first time. But it is one of those shows that you cannot stop at the end. We actually always stop like 15 minutes or 20 minutes into the next episode and then watch like to the middle of the next episode.
That's a pro move. We do the same thing.
Yeah.
We're like, you just have to stop it at a point where the action is at its minimum. You're like, okay, it's a great place to stop. Let's end it there. And then you watch through to the next halfway point.
Yeah,
love it.
Very grateful that we don't have to wait until the next week like Yumi and Painter did in this one, but it's Netflix these days, man.
Hey.
It's the best. It's the best. So yeah, that was my initial take on the book. I really liked that feel for it. The world is just super fascinating. What were your initial thoughts on all that?
My initial, so I wanted to do a kind of a format initial thought.
Yeah, give me it.
Right before we hit record on this, you showed me your copy, which is like the painted copy, the premiere copy, and I'm regretting the fact that I had listened to the whole book. This is one that I wish I had read.
Oh, really?
For sure. One of the things that I loved about Sunlit Man is I took the time to like physically read it.
Yeah.
I had forgotten how much fun it is to read through a physical book. And you just like with the Kindle, with audiobooks, it's just really easy to just go through a book. And this is one, especially with the paintings inside. I mean, he's a painter. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But it really brings a lot more of the cultural aspect and like the realism, the people, what they look like. I think they just did a really good job of capturing that and reflecting those images back onto the story. Was like, that was a cool moment for me to be able to be like, yeah, okay, that makes so much sense. How they interacted, how they worked together, like the stringent nature of Yumi and all that stuff. Is just the character they drew almost fit better to those characters and who they were than my imagined version.
Yeah.
Which I thought my imagination was pretty good.
Yeah.
But apparently not good enough to fully encapsulate the story. So I think that was one thing that I wish I could change.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want to take away from that. 'Cause, so you were talking about with this book that it's hard to get your imagination around it when you see the pictures. I think right before this too, that you said that your mind had naturally started putting like American faces on it.
I've never seen like a manga or an anime series, so that was just difficult.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, since I had the experience with like some Korean shows and things like that, like I had no problem with it. Like
that's awesome.
Like I was just able to imagine like all of that completely, and it was really fun for that reason. I really liked it.
I think that would have improved the story for me. It doesn't actually affect my overall rating because having seen that, like I totally understand that's how it should be taken in as a story. Totally makes sense. That's my regret, I'll say.
Yeah.
If you're planning on reading Yumi, you haven't read it yet. I mean, there's going to be spoilers in this video, but I would recommend reading the physical copy or at least having access to it so you can use that.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing I pulled out from what you're saying is that you said that Audible and Kindle like it gives you that feeling. Did you mean to say Kindle as well?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I have a Kindle. I enjoy reading it. It's fun. It's especially like, man, you could take it to the beach and not even worry about it. It's so great.
Yeah.
So
Love
great.
that. Love that.
I hate taking a book on vacation. Hated because I don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
Taking a book on vacation, you're like, I have to pack it in the right spot. Otherwise it's going to get crushed or heaven forbid bent.
Oh,
and so all those things, you're just terrified. But having a Kindle fixes that. Now, it doesn't really have that same effect for me as reading the physical book, having a bookmark, turning the page, the physical page. That is fun. And I read fairly quickly. So it's one of the things that I like as you're turning the pages, as you're just like really engulfed in the story. It's hilarious because my wife would just be like, you turn pages so fast. Like relax.
Careful not to get too many paper cuts with that.
No, but it's just, you get so into the story with a physical book. Sometimes it's just so fun. And it's a good experience that you can't always enjoy, especially with adult life and being so busy.
I agree with that. And so I actually went on a trip this past week, and so I couldn't take this physical copy, and I was really bummed about it because I actually didn't
want it to get bent.
I know. For real though, that's the exact reason. Like I did bring my Kindle though for it, so I could read like sometimes, so I didn't have to stare at a wall when I want to listen. But
sorry to interrupt. Does the Kindle have those images, or no?
It does. I didn't see the images in the parts I was reading on it.
Okay, it at least has those illustrations. Maybe not.
I think it does. I've seen
it. You have.
I did it with Tress, and I think I saw them in Tress. I would assume that's in Yumi as well.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I feel the same way as you. Just like having the physical copy, turning the pages, you can remember where something happened on a specific page.
Yeah.
Where it feels in the book. Like there's just something different
where
about
you
that.
were in the book. All of that comes together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just whenever you're on a virtual like world of like Kindle or something like that, like I don't know, even when you're scrolling to read something, you can't imagine like where that's
at.
What it might you have a hard time finding it.
Have you ever, when you're getting to the end of a story, you're like, in your left hand, you've got like the majority of the book.
Yes.
You know you're almost done. The intensity's like building. You're ready to just pound through the last third of the book. You're excited. Things are happening. But on a Kindle, it's just like the 213 of 272. You're like, what does that even mean?
No, but the Kindle's even worse. This is my biggest gripe with the Kindle. I cannot stand it. It will only tell you location number out of like everything. It won't give you a specific page unless you download the PDF version or
like
something.
The real page.
I don't really care if it's the real page or not. If I'm zoomed out or zoomed in on the text, I want it to update to tell me what page I'm on and how many pages I have left in the Kindle.
Oh, I'm surprised it doesn't say that. I wonder if it's a setting.
I've been looking through settings forever.
I like the one that tells me how much time I have left in the book based on my reading speed.
I do not like that one because I read pretty slow. Yeah, but I do like it'll tell you how many pages are left in the chapter, or I just been using the percent, how much percent of the book is left. I wish it could tell me percent of the chapter, but yes, because the percent doesn't change that much, and it makes you feel like you're reading slow.
That's true,
and that's
like
awful
the percent
feeling.
Takes a long time to change, but if you're reading through a book and you're turning pages, you've got a feel for it. That's a good point.
Yeah. So anyways, those are my Kindle thoughts.
If you have any thoughts on the Kindle, I want to see some pros and cons from the comment section. What you guys think about, if you have experienced the Kindle, if you still read more physical books than audiobooks. Like, first of all, how do you find the time? And I'm so impressed. But that is a good question. I think we need some answers to.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what did you think about the world that they lived in?
This one, I think, really tripped me out more than normal with like the descriptions, because it was 2 worlds, really, in my mind, for the majority. But 2 worlds, the shroud was kind of confusing, and like the light sources, the fact they swapped back and forth, it was more difficult for me to put details together, which I think is intentional, a way of the storytelling, because they were the same way, trying to decipher each other's worlds. But man, I don't feel like I had the same Cosmere-esque, like, here's the world, here's the system, here's how they use that system to beat the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Like that regular Sanderson that I'm used to. It was very different from that. Very different. Yeah. At least in my mind.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I actually really liked the world. Like, I thought it was really fascinating. I could attribute some of that switching and vagueness to the dream nature of it, like kind of making it feel more dreamy type thing. But I really did love how creative the world was. So the whole idea with the nightmares and the shroud was super fascinating.
I agree.
It reminded me a lot of the Midnight Essence like type thing, and I almost thought, like, is this connected or something like that? Wasn't by the end, which was interesting. But similar type of idea a little bit there. But then Yumi's world was also fantastic. So having a world that, like, you have your heat source coming from the ground is so interesting. And it made me like think about the universe differently. I'm like, wow, are there other planets out there that can sustain life that is not from a heat source from the sun, but it's a heat source from the ground up? And so you couldn't do it because you need photosynthesis and like the sun, like all those things. Like I'm like, Jade is about to get me here, but I'm like, I don't know, because heat source is super, super important for life, but to have it come from the planet itself was really, really fascinating.
Interesting. I'm gonna skip to a full spoiler. It'd be like, was any of it real though?
The ground heating, I can't remember,
because that's the thing. If they were all spirit essences anyway. Mm-hmm. How real was like the physical elements of their world? Like the trees weren't even real that were floating around.
Yeah. So for me, it was less that like it was real or not. It was more just like
the mechanics,
the contact, like the opportunity for it to be real.
Sure.
Like
yeah.
You know,
the creativity is pretty awesome. In that element for sure. So I know you haven't seen all of Avatar: Last Airbender, have you?
No.
Okay, it's understandable. I know your first attempt at it was the new version, and
no. I want to.
The originals, classics. When your kids are old enough, so much fun.
Yeah.
But one of the episodes that they have, he goes to a town that's being terrorized by a spirit. Okay, and this spirit is like crazy.
I've actually seen this episode.
Okay, there we go. It's perfect. So you know what I'm talking about, where they're being terrorized. He's burning stuff. This is almost exactly what I was picturing with the nightmares. Because the way to resolve that problem is like he had to work with the spirits, and the spirit turns from this crazy monster into like a panda and walks away.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
it's the same thing.
Like what he's doing.
It's funny though, because I don't even think he's seen Avatar. Because I actually know this because in his podcast, like he's like, people bring this up all the time that I need to watch Avatar, and it's like, I just haven't found time for it yet. Like I want
That's
to,
fair.
I haven't
it's hard
seen
to
it.
find time.
So he hasn't seen it. I don't think he's seen it at all. Like especially when he wrote this book, I don't think he's seen it. So that's pretty crazy. Like to have that.
It is pretty cool. I think it's just a cool similarity. It seems very, very similar. I just imagine it just painted black. Basically the same thing. But yeah, that's what I had in my mind, at least, as a kind of a type for this.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
How do you feel overall about the just stories told by Hoyd?
that.
So we've had a couple now.
Yeah.
Especially with the secret projects.
Yeah. So about
What do you
this
think about
story
'em?
specifically,
This one in particular, but just kind of now that we've read a couple of them, how do you think about the format?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of stories we have, right? We have like the Stormlight stories, we have like the Tress stories, and the Yumi stories, like
Where the book is told by Hoyt.
Okay, yeah. So we have got two then.
Yep.
So Tress and Yumi. I think it's great. I think it's really fun to have his perspective of like what's going on. His little side comments I think are hilarious.
I love the side comments. I'm like, oh, uncalled for.
Yeah, I know.
He tells
completely
the story.
uncalled for.
He tells the story, and anytime they talk about him, he's like, hey, I take that personally.
That's right. Well, I mean, let me take a sidestep too. Like, well, actually, no, this isn't a sidestep. That I thought it was really fun. It did feel like a little bit of a repeat from Tress. I'm like, okay, you're gonna be cursed again, and like you're gonna have like no influence in the story until like the very end. This one was way less so than Tress.
That's true.
But I was like a little bit just like like we've already seen this. Like we already know like I don't know, the whole curse thing. But I don't know. So what did you think about that aspect of it? Is with Hoyd being cursed in the book? Like, did it feel like a repeat to you?
I honestly didn't think of it much as a repeat. When now that you say that, I'm like, oh man, yeah. I totally get that. I really like listening to the stories told by him. I think he just has a really good way of saying, like, even at the end, it just culminates in the fact that he's like, so anyway, this whole story was about me, and I hope you didn't think it was about anybody else.
Yep.
Like, I don't know what that other stuff was happening that I was talking about, but like the real story here is how I escaped.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's a cool, it's just creative. It's fun. He has a great way of telling a story through that lens of Hoyd. And I think I think it adds to the book overall because he has such funny ways of providing context. And maybe that does help, especially in a world that's confusing, where he can say, yeah, that's just how it works, or it's because of this. Like, you just add little things in because it has a narrator, and that just gives you a lot more liberty to say those things. It toes a line, because sometimes, like, you are very big on saying, show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
On books in general.
Yep.
And sometimes when you have a narrator, you can lean a little bit more toward, like, I'll just explain how the magic works and not.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like Hoyd is that storyteller saying, I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of fun. It's kind of a balance, but I liked it.
I think I'm okay with people like explaining things to you, but this video does it. I know this video. This book does it really well with the show you type thing. Even though he has a lot of tell you like moments, it just fits well into the story. It's in the right places. I'm not reading an encyclopedia page. I'm reading a story, which is really, really good. So that's what I liked about it. What did you think about design's relationship with Hoyd?
I liked at the beginning when he was like, "Man, of all the Spren I could have bonded."
Yeah.
He like wishes he could have bonded a cryptic because they're so interesting.
Yeah.
But there were parts for me that design was kind of annoyingly convenient.
Oh yeah.
It just kind of felt like it was that one like shining thing that keeps the story aloft and saves the day when absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I like to avoid that feeling as much as possible when there's like, oh, in the darkest moment possible, like, oh, well, check it out. There's this thing all along and problem solved.
Yeah.
Instead of a creative, oh, here's all the materials we had and let's make it work, which he does usually a very good job of. Oftentimes, though, some things like this are just like, oh, it's very convenient. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this story in particular, don't let me forget about my design thoughts, but
okay.
But this story in particular, with what you're saying, is that there's the classic heroes story.
Yep.
And this one, I think, purposely follows that pretty well. And this would be the person that is the person who comes in and gives advice and turns around your story. Like, that could be designed in this place, right? Just very convenient. Like, oh, they came, and like they did that. Like, Star Wars is classic. It's got Yoda for that part.
Yeah.
All those things. But so I think that works because you're seeing Painter go from somebody who is not a hero at all to becoming the hero in the end. And I think it's very, oh man, now I'm like getting into this part I actually really want to talk about. But we'll go back to design in a minute. But
okay.
I just loved this part of the story that at the very beginning, Yumi is like, you're not a hero. Like, why did they send me someone who's not a hero? And like, you've just been lying about everything. And then he kind of feels bad about it. but then you see him become the hero by the end, and exactly the hero that she needed. And that's what I love about the story, is it because it shows that heroes aren't just the way that Yumi imagined they would be. It's not someone who just shows up and who've been a hero their whole lives and has like lives in a kingdom and has their concubines and like all those like hilarious moments in the book. But it's someone who started out as a normal human being and became a hero out of necessity.
And even a bit of a broken human being. Like, it's a difficult juxtaposition between those two. I think it's so fun that he mashes them together because of that. It's like there's Yumi on the one hand who's strict to duty. She also is in a very elevated position. And then you have Painter, who's very passionate, loose on the rules.
Yep.
But he's in the like a very lowly member of society, like a lowly position, but even like he's the bottom rung of that lowly job.
Yeah.
So it's like these complete opposites, not only in mannerisms, but also in their station in life. And they come together and they fall in love.
Yeah, it's a love story.
It's to me, I think the overarching theme was, one, Hoyd says this in chapter 28. I even wrote it down.
Yeah.
He says contradiction is the core of modern life, which I think is interesting because we do see it a lot. But because they were so contradictory in their thoughts, they did not like each other in various moments. And they're like, it's so frustrating. Can't believe we stuck with this person. Both of them were annoyed, for sure. But it just goes to explain, and there's always some great morals in his stories, that it really is just a limit of understanding. When you're able to really live in someone else's life, which is exactly what they did, like walk a mile in my shoes situation.
Right.
When you live through someone else's life, see through their eyes, you can gain that appreciation for anyone. Even someone in a completely different type of person, in a completely different station, I mean, we got different gender, we got different, all this stuff going on. And like, that's a very different mindset. But they were able to, when they lived in each other's lives, see it and come to really appreciate the effort that each one put in. I think that's really cool overall for the book.
Yep. I really liked that. And when they first start that whole like switch, and he has to like start stacking rocks and everything, like it just threw me back to those dreams that you would have, like where, well, at least I would have in college, where I'm like, you dream that you forgot to unenroll from a class that you signed up for. And today is the exam day and you have to perform. Like, how stressful is that? You're like, or you just missed the exam completely. Like, you're like, why didn't I just unenroll? Now I have like a failure. Anyways, stressful dreams. I don't know if you've ever had those, but
that sounds very stressful.
Never had that?
I don't think I have that specific dream on my resume yet.
My wife and I both have those types of dreams. Like,
it's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. I still get them every once in a while. I went to college years ago. Like,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was crazy. But anyways, my design thoughts.
Yes, good time.
I actually really love design. I think that like it's a spren.
It's a cryptic spren.
A cryptic spren. I think it's hilarious. The interactions that it has with Hoyd. I've loved it. The cryptic ever since she was introduced in Rhythm of War, and just like the whole like just play between it. Like her and Wit, like it's just so funny. Like I don't know, I just love it. I think it adds a good dynamic. I just hope that it doesn't get like too distracting, because at some points like I do feel like okay, like I get it, like you have this really annoying spren that like is always hanging out with you, but I want to hear like just your perspective from things. I don't want to hear design chime in every single time you say something. Which
that is a complaint that I have for the Stormlight Archive too. Like sometimes the cryptic spren just jump in way too much.
Yeah.
And like the little random quips about like, oh, I don't agree. Or like, okay, there's too much. There's too much of the jumping in. But anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, for me, I didn't think it had gone too far, like in this book or in the Stormlight Archive, but I could see it like easily going too far. So
yeah. Towing the line for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, those are my design thoughts.
Do you have a favorite storyline?
Of the two?
Let's like take the two worlds. Which story did you like the best?
Oh man, I think I liked Painter's story a little bit more, like the Painter's world. I thought it was just very fascinating, like the whole idea of painting and the nightmares and the shroud and everything. But that isn't to say like Yumi's world was super interesting too. Like we got to get in the machine and everything too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know you will. I know
we
you
will.
We will. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But I guess kind of in that line, I want to talk about like the stacking rocks.
Okay.
So the way that Sanderson describes stacking rocks makes it sound like so interesting that I want to go out and try stacking rocks, like and see like
He's just that good.
I know. Can I feel like the weight of the rock and like understand the rock and just place it there perfectly? And like I thought that was fascinating. But
Next live stream on the channel.
Next live stream, we are stacking rocks.
Stack rocks.
Or we'll be doing it at Dragonsteel. We have a rock stacking activity.
We'll just bring a bunch of rocks. Hey, that's a great idea.
I actually think it's a great idea.
Just bring a bunch of rocks and just have like rock stacking challenge.
I can't remember if that's something that have already announced that they're doing something like that, or if like that's just a great idea that we have.
That's just a great idea.
We'll take it. Even if they've already taken that idea, we'll say it was ours.
Well, we have a timestamp in the video. We got it.
That's right. It's ours. But anyways, I just thought that was fascinating. But my favorite part about that whole thing is just recognizing the beauty that you can find in different people's hobbies that you don't understand once you start to understand them. So I had a really great example of this with someone that I met who was really into bowling. And I'm like interesting. I don't know. I ask people questions about their lives, like when they do things that like why do you do bowling? What makes it interesting? And they went on to describe like all these crazy things about bowling that I had no idea. So this guy like was very good. He had like 13 perfect games in like his whole life or something like that, nearly pro. But he was saying, he's like, yeah, you actually go to competitions and they have different ways that they oil the lanes. Like they'll oil it in like stripes or a Christmas tree or like all sorts of stuff. They won't even tell you what the oil pattern is sometimes. And you have to figure it out as you bowl and try and get like the perfect score and all these different types of things. And it just made me like, wow, like bowling all of a sudden is like fascinating to me. And like, I understand more of it. And just because of learning about someone else's world makes you appreciate what they're interested in. And that is one of my favorite things. And I feel like this book really
That's literally this book. That's perfect.
Yeah, I love that. I looked like you were going to say something.
No, it's understanding someone else's world. And I think I was just going to be like, wow, that's literally exactly what he talks about. It's like, I feel like the whole moral of the book.
Yeah.
Understanding other people and really becoming more, maybe not even inclusive, but just more understanding of like the wide world and how many experiences there are to see.
Yeah. And not only that, it's just like how everything is an art, like which is like it's just amazing. He's like, not only is art, but like you can make stacking rocks art, you can have painting art, you can have bodybuilding is a form of art.
So that's an interesting transition. But I did want to talk about the art element because I thought that was really, really cool. The bodybuilding part of it was like, yeah. You can make a machine. You could make a seesaw lever that can lift more weight than any human on Earth. Not that hard. You can go to the park and you can like, make it work with a stick. It's not that. That's not that crazy. The crazy thing is the achievement of something that was difficult, the challenge. So the art in it is like the art of a person accomplishing something. And I think I just really want to.
And so it's just what I was saying earlier. Like it was amazing, like how many different forms of art they have. They have pretty much like his whole old crew has just different activities that they all like to do. And like, it was just amazing to me that they pointed out the things that you wouldn't normally see as art, like bodybuilding as art. And I just love the whole idea that you're talking about. Just like, yeah, it's all about the human achievement. It's about seeing what other humans can do and saying like, wow, they worked hard. They did that. They were able to accomplish it like from their hard labors, even though something else could potentially do it way better.
And it doesn't even have to be a comparison to something that's not human. Because you think about like the great masters of oil painting. Like your goal in life as a creative person shouldn't be to make exactly the same painting. That's like, yeah, they did amazing work and everyone reveres like these amazing paintings. But the goal of individual creativity is an individual pursuit, but also an individual lens on how well it did. Because even if you did create something incredible, it's can't be the same as somebody else. I know Hoyt said this. I don't know where. But he says, like, what's the most important thing that a person can have?
It's at the end of book 1 of the Stormlight Archive.
There we go.
I'm pretty positive.
But it's like, what's the most important skill or important thing for men to have and just like people in general? And it ended up being novelty. It's not even being the smartest, because if you're the smartest person in the world and you come up with the greatest physics theory, but you're the second person to do it, nobody cares. It's all about novelty, about innovation. So creativity, I think, is an easy way to do that. Like he had so many great paintings that he had done because he was just passionate about it and really trying to explore the limits of what he could do. Same thing with everyone in that crew. They were like thinking about new creative things that they could do. Like the person that had the drama scopes. Like, yeah, horoscopes already existed, but they're like, I could do something cool.
Yeah, see, another form of art, right?
Exactly.
Like, that was amazing. That was really cool. So I really like that.
And think about today's day and age, right? Where people are like, oh, AI art's going to completely replace all the artists in the world and AI graphic design and all these things. But then you think about, it's not the perfection of the art that makes people appreciate it. Like you could computer generate an image of anything you want. Like you think about some of the best paintings in the world aren't photorealistic. Like yeah, AI could just generate something perfect to the exact dimensions that you need, but it's not effort. There's no input to that. It's not like this striving for greatness that works with all these paintings.
Well, what did Sanderson say in the book, that the machine doesn't care? Like, yeah, I think he said that in like the Yumi book. He's like, the machine can do all these things, and it's like he was stacking the rocks and it was knocking him over, but because it just doesn't care. Like it's just doing it to do it, and like just
performing the task instead of being the artist.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, and that kind of thing is just gives it more value. Is to have
the machine is so interesting too. I don't know if you're ready to go into that.
Yeah, let's dive into it. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts.
The machine overall, like I loved the fact that they had the kind of. I see it as electricity, but the helion.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing, right?
I think
the way, at least it's energy that they can, like raw energy they can convert into power, at the very least.
Yeah.
But the machine that they use, I think, is really crazy where there's just that one flaw. You think about they turned on the machine and then it basically destroyed society.
Yeah.
They flipped the switch and that was the end. I almost feel like that part of the book is an omen.
It's so scary.
Like, be careful with what you're messing with, especially if you don't completely understand it. Like, oh, check out this cool thing. Let's flip it on and see what happens. And that's not always a good idea.
No.
There are some decisions you can't easily come back from. And I think that was one of the interesting tidbits, especially these days. But I do think that there's a lot of parallels to this is a machine. It's just like it's feeding on the souls. It's feeding on all the energy. It grabs everything that it can to do what? Right? Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing of consequence. Again, like, we go back to the stacking of rocks. I'm like, I wish that was explained more. Like there was some hidden meaning to why they're stacking rocks, but it was just stacking rocks in the end.
Yeah, it was art.
That's interesting, but I think it was one of those things where it's like, I feel like there could have been a cool subtext meaning to it.
Yeah. Well, so with the whole machine thing though, on just how like it really has to, like, it doesn't really matter if it's a machine like doing it, because you care what humans can do. I'm into disc golf, and so recently I was just watching this video on YouTube where the title of the video is just trying to get clicks, but it's like, will like this robot replace me in disc golf? And it's one of the
Simon Lizotte video.
It's a Simon Lizotte video. But and so they just created this robot that just shoots like frisbees just like perfectly every single time, and you can just like slightly aim it to the side and like get it to go exactly where you want it to go. And for me, like, the video is entertaining and interesting because they built a robot that can do that, but in no way am I jealous of the robot for what the robot can do, and do I care that the robot can do that? Like,
you're not going to give up disc golf because the robot can throw further than you.
Right, exactly. And I'm not going to give up watching the pros because the pros can't throw as perfectly as a robot. Like, I don't really care what the robot can do. Like, it's just more I care what the humans can do with it too. So I thought that was really interesting. So what did you think about the whole AI comparison then? So we had a lot of viewers who were really, really excited. Every single time we talked about AI, for example, we talked about, will AI audiobook readers happen? And like, is that like a thing? And so what do you think of like that in context of this book?
So I think, yes, AI audiobook readers is going to be a thing.
Yes.
I think that's slightly divergent from like the whole AI won't replace us because of art and creativity. I think reading in a book, it toes the line a little bit, because like, yeah, I would love AI to replace random menial tasks that I do. That's on the one end. Like, I don't want to have to like look up random stuff or convert formats of documents. Like, I'd love it if AI could just do that.
You don't want to have to stack rocks all by yourself.
Exactly. No, like, there's the menial tasks, but then there's also like the creative endeavors. Like, do we want AI to replace our artists? No, that would be so lame. If you're just like, all the art in your home is just drawn by a computer, like, what's the point of that? So anyway, there's limits and there's a balance to where AI fits. But I honestly didn't get as strong of an AI connection overall in this book, other than like the sub motives, like the subtext and stuff. As far as comparison to AI, I didn't get as much as I expected based on all the comments we had for the AI. When you read Yumi, you're gonna be blown away. It's like I feel like it made sense on the storyline how it connected, but I was almost expecting like AI to be in it. I feel like I didn't get that same sense.
I was kind of thinking that too. What I was kind of thinking with that too is that the whole, oh man, I'm totally losing my train of thought there. Just can't remember.
Oh, got you.
I know it. Well, I'll start with this. There it is. So you're talking about art in your home and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I could still see though a place for AI with art in your home. So I've experimented making with like art in like Midjourney and things like that, with making my own art because I want to make my own art to hang in my own home. But the difference is that I'm not just like having AI just create something random to hang in my home. It feels like it's my art because I'm the one like putting in the effort, putting in like all like change this, do that. And like it almost like the combination of the two makes it work. And so I went to a conference recently and they talk about AI. It was a big topic there. And they were talking about pretty much the big question is like, will it replace us? And the answer is no, because you will always need like human input to make it to be the best that it can be. You're going to need the combination of the two. I've said this before in the past.
Yeah.
And they reiterated it there too. It's just saying AI gets better and better when it has the human touch to guide it, to make it human. Because there is something that isn't human about it when you like it's just made on its own. So it's, I don't know, it's just kind of fascinating.
That makes sense. The inputs, the guidance, maybe.
Yeah.
Like the direction to where like this is really the goal that we're going for.
Yeah. It just makes sense. Gives it the human touch. So, but I don't know. I think it was I thought it was an AI message, and I thought it was really like just kind of like eerie, just kind of what you're saying earlier. To be careful not to flip the switch on things that like, we
don't just flip the switch just because.
Yeah, and you said like it's like we are kind of going through that right now, right? Like we're kind of going through our modern day Manhattan Project where everyone's trying to build AI as fast as they can, and like they didn't realize like, oh yeah, you can't just tell a machine to do something. You have to like really think about like what are the ramifications of this? Like what does this actually mean to a machine that doesn't think or feel? And
there's a lot of sides to this story, and I'm ready for the comments. But there's the side of, guys, it's just an LLM. So it's a GPT is just a pre-trained transformer. All it does is take inputs and give you outputs based on the best likelihood of success. Like, okay, I understand that element of it. It makes sense.
Yep.
However, I do think the research and the efforts that are going into attempting AGI by these companies are getting to a point where it's like they're so competitive that I feel like they're taking more risks than they should.
Yeah.
And they're saying like, oh, not even on a company level, like, oh, we want our company to make the most money. A government level of people saying like, well, we can't be the last ones to get there, so we need to just throw everything at it and just flip all the switches. I don't even care because we can't be last.
Yeah.
That type of thing. I feel like you run into a lot of risks. So I'm interested in the comments. But that's where I'll leave that one.
Fascinating. Maybe we'll actually find out that AI needs to feed on our souls. So
well, that'd be terrifying.
That would be terrifying. Yeah.
So one thing I want to kind of go back into the story of Yumi for is kind of an overall feeling that I've got with Sanderson. I haven't finished the Cosmere. Marty has, so I feel like it's still a relevant time to talk about it. But I've noticed something the more we've read, and we've read a lot of books on the podcast so far. I think we're in the 50s or something of videos yet. But one of the things that I think is cool is the fact that a story becomes for you what you invest into it. A well-written story. There are some stories that take me out of the action and that's frustrating.
Yeah.
But a well-written story can be, oh, that was interesting, or it can be, that was life-changing, based on what you invest into it. So if you're reading a book and you stop to think, how do I feel about like how these different characters are interacting with each other? How does that compare to maybe things that I've seen in my life? Or is that me? Is that not me? Is it someone I know? How do you like make that real for you? Then as you read the story, it's like, wow, you're opening new doors. You're thinking of new creative ideas versus like you could go through all of the Cosmere and be like, yeah, it was interesting. You know, a couple of guys slinging around something called Stormlight. It's whatever. It's cool, I guess.
Yeah.
Some heroes, some bad guys. It's a regular story. But if you would like invest that time, you invest that effort of like thinking and pondering, and almost what we do on the podcast is kind of what does it for me to be able to say, I'm really thinking about what is important to me about this book? What do I like about it? What's interesting? What thoughts have I had? And then we can discuss them. That's the best part.
Yeah.
I think that the more I've invested into these books and these stories, the more I'm like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
It's really easy to go through a book and be like, there was a 5, 5 out of 10, whatever. But then if you like make it real for yourself, it changes everything about the book, I think. So the more you invest into a good story, the more you will get out of it. So if you find yourself reading a lot of books and you're like, I read, it's kind of fine, it's whatever. I would challenge you to maybe read a little slower or take notes or find some sort of great podcast that you could watch and listen to as you're reading through books and start to think about that. But I thought it was something that clicked for me during this book that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I love that. And
maybe it's its own video. Who knows?
I know. Well, it's just the takeaways you get from these books are so fascinating. And it's just like what I was talking about earlier. It's just about like how heroes are created and stuff. That was like a big takeaway that like I got from this one. And I loved how like Yumi and Painter were able to come back together and say like, wait, like I can change this about like my life and make things better and turn things around. And especially Painter, he's able to say like, you know what, I can go back to my friends and fix this problem, right this wrong that has been made.
The importance of good friends, not even just from his perspective, but also the perspective of the friends to be like, you know what, I understand. Let's figure this out. Let's try again.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to. And there are people that wouldn't. So I think that it was cool from all angles. For sure.
Yeah, I really liked that too. It was interesting too. I don't think he went down this road all the way, but he does like to include different disorders in his books and like just different, not even disorders, but just even physical ailments or I guess disorders as well. I thought he was going to go down to like, oh, you like Painter's a compulsive liar. Like I thought he was going to go down this one too, but like he didn't. I'll go down that road, which is fine too. Like I'm kind of glad he didn't. So
it didn't make as much sense for this story because I think his path wouldn't have worked quite as well. But you're right.
Yeah. A couple other highlights from the book that I really liked. I thought that part was hilarious and freaky when they go to the shroud and they're starting. Man. Yeah, they're starting. Yumi starts building her stones and the shroud starts parting and it keeps parting until like a Yokohijo like pops out from the shroud and like starts reaching and like doing a silent scream and like for help. And even Design freaks out. Yeah, like, just like, whoa! Like, I thought that was hilarious.
That was a crazy, reading through that part, you're just like, oh man.
Oh man.
Terrifying. Don't go into that shroud. That's horrible.
Go in there. Like, that is freaky. So I thought that was really funny. What did you think about, are you ready to go into like the Sanderlanche?
I do want to talk about kind of the resolution. Maybe it gets us into the Sanderlanche.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that I think is a design that mentions it when she's reading the spirit web, I guess she calls it.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, the investiture, like, you're basically a returned.
Yeah.
Like that. Cool? I was like, okay, this leads me to when I would recommend someone read Yumi. And I think reading it at the end like we did is perfect. I would say this is one of the capstone books, like just read at the end.
Yeah.
When you have a really good sense of it and you want to kind of be diverted into a slightly different world that still is in the Cosmere, slightly different, you know the cryptic situation, Hoyd, and then things like this from Elantris, you kind of have all of that base. You just cap it off with Yumi. I think it's the best time to read it.
Yes, I was thinking about this a lot. I'm like, would I recommend this to someone as one of their first Sanderson books? And I'm really close to that point where I think you could, but like there are too many small things in here that I think like especially that moment when they're looking at connection, all the design things saying like I'm not human, and Hoyd being from another planet. Like I think those parts might come off as like weird, like if you hadn't read anything else. But still though, I think I would still recommend it to my wife to read this book
first.
Just as next, like whatever.
Okay.
Just I don't know when she's gonna get into the rest of the Cosmere. She's read Mistborn and things like that, but I would totally recommend her to read this book. I think that she would really enjoy it and have a lot of fun with it. So
I honestly recommended it to my wife as well. She's read a little bit more of the Cosmere, I think.
Yeah.
She's been reading along with a lot of the podcast books. And I was like, yeah, you should definitely read this.
Yeah, she would really like that one.
You would really like it.
Yeah, she would. I think Malia would really like this too.
She loves also like I know they're slightly different, but like the Spirited Away, like what is it called? Kiki's Delivery Service is another one. Like, she loves that style, those movies. So I think she would really enjoy this book.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's just a fun book. I really, really enjoyed it. Cool. Anything else before
I think that
Sanderlanche?
let's do it.
Okay, so Sanderlanche happens and everything just goes nuts, right?
Yeah.
I love the whole thing where he goes into the Night Watch and they don't believe him.
Yeah.
And which is just the whole don't trust your heroes type thing. Even Hoyt says it, like it's like every world has their own trope, or
Don't
like
meet
saying,
your heroes.
like, don't meet your heroes because if you're watching in the sky, they'll stab you in the gut, like which is hilarious. But he's like, but like you shouldn't believe that. Is
Like,
what he says.
Our world's version of that is slightly different, but it's fine.
That's right. He says, don't believe that. He's like, heroes are not meant to be real. Like, they're meant to be fictionalized. They're meant to be, it's good for humans to have something to like fictionalize to make them become better and things like that.
He's like
really
it's like a
perspective.
story. It's basically a story. Like, what you are saying is your hero is the story, not the human. Like that, I guess for us with the humans, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like the goal that's been fantasized and like all these different like it's fantastic, it's amazing. All these things that you've attributed to this hero is not really that person. It's the idea that you can really hold on to. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with that. Yep. I love that. He loves stories.
Yeah. I love that too. I thought that was really great. So the other thing was though, I love that everyone gets to see that Painter was telling the truth in the end about this. Some of my least favorite tropes or themes or whatever you want to call it is this happened in movies like several years ago, just over and over and over again, especially growing up. You'll see movies where the kids will be seeing something is going wrong. And then like they go through these like crazy experiences and then the whole movie wraps up. They save the world and everything. And they get home and they're like, so kids, like, what's for dinner? And like the parents have no idea that anything happened. No one else had any idea that anything happened. It only happened to the kids, only happened to these specific people. And the rest of the world just goes along in their merry way and has no idea. But I love that this book is able to say like, no, this is real. And it's not just Yumi and Painter seeing this stuff happening. It's everyone saw this happening. This is very clearly real, very big thing. It's one of the reasons why I really like Stranger Things, because again, I felt the whole time I'm like this is really going to be really dumb if only the kids can see this as a problem. But no, like you start seeing like hints of it everywhere, and like adults are realizing this is a problem, and I just love that. The last thing I will say on that is there is one movie that pulls it off well, that where it goes the opposite direction, and that would be, I know The Lord of the Rings is different in the book with the way it ends than the movie, but we'll just pretend like it's just the movie for now. But
the Lord of the Rings movie. Got it.
Lord of the Rings movie, when they go back to the Shire and the Shire has no idea that like it had anything, but that fits because it's the Shire and the hobbits don't care about the rest of the world and like they are oblivious to the rest of the world. So moments like that work, but I do love it when the whole world realizes, or like a greater population realizes what's going on. So
that is super interesting.
Yeah.
I think one of the things for the whole Sanderlanche for me, it was probably, and I say this having loved the Sanderlanches of the General Cosmere, probably one of my least favorite Sanderlanches.
Really?
Because at least the way, maybe it was the way it was written in, but for me it felt like the end, like the last season of Lost, where I'm just like, wait, who's real? Who's not real? What's fake? What's been a dream the whole time? Like I'm all over the place with like just at the end of a book just turning reality off. You're just like, okay, hold on.
Oh my gosh.
What am I supposed to see into this? Like, they're not real, but that's real and that's not real. So when they swapped, does that mean he wasn't real? All this stuff is just...
Do you get it now though?
I'm starting to understand it more as I'm thinking more about it. But honestly, during that part, I was thrown a little bit, and that affected me for sure.
Because the whole idea, right, is that the machine was stealing the souls of everyone, and so when it stole the like souls, it turned them into the shroud, pretty much, and so that whole civilization got turned into the shroud, and then one of the shroud like spirits was Yumi, and she was able to connect with Painter, and be able to like communicate, hey, I'm stuck. Like, oh, I need to be released from this machine. And so like they were able to connect Yumi to Painter to give her more sense of reality, to remember her like memories. And yeah.
Well, she had already escaped from the shroud, like all the Yokihiju. Oh my goodness, I said that wrong terribly. What is it again?
Well, I had it until you said it.
I think it's Yokihijo or something like that.
Yeah, Yokihijo.
And but all of them had already escaped the shroud. But I'm like, what? Why was the shroud kind of just around Painter's city? But they also had their own little like fake cities that they had set up that were covered, and then they had the hole for the sun. Like all these little details where you're just like, they just kind of threw all those details out, and you're just like, okay, even geographically, I'm like, where are we at? Like, what is going on? Because when they swapped roles, they're also trying to convince you that like one of them is not actually real because they're just a spirit and they're being manipulated. Yeah. So when he goes into that, like he's not real, but was he actually going there? Was he just kind of in his mind, his own spirit? They were just connected. Like it was hard for me to follow. Maybe I just didn't get it as much as everybody else did, but it was hard for me to follow. And I think for these reasons, I had a harder time with the Sanderlands than others.
Yeah. I liked it a lot.
Plot resolutions were great, but the kind of like world resolutions were weird to me.
Yeah. I could see it being confusing. I honestly, like, and now that you say it, like, I don't really feel like I can explain it really clearly, but I feel like it makes sense.
Okay.
You know? But I don't know. I did like skip back a lot. Like every single time Hoyd stepped in and explained things, I jumped back a few times just because I really wanted to understand.
I should have done that. It leads me to my like overall picture of the Cosmere as a puzzle made up of other smaller puzzles.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I have this picture that I want to create, and it's the Cosmere. But every time you want to add a puzzle piece, you have to open up a new box of puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Finish that one, and then you finish the piece that you can put in the Cosmere. It's a lot of effort. I can see why some people are like, I'm not even going to start.
No, seriously. Well, the good thing is, though, is that you don't have to piece the pieces together to enjoy the story.
No, you don't.
Which is, I think, very, very smart on his part to do it.
Well, because people like us can be included, because we're never going to be the absolute experts in anything Cosmere related.
I think, though, that it will be all wrapped up in the end in a way that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah.
Like, especially once they start getting into the Dragonsteel books and the Last Mistborn books. And
it allows for enough complexity that people can dive deep into whatever they want, which a lot of people do very much enjoy, diving deeper into things instead of just kind of skimming the surface of the story.
Yeah. I just had to skip back over and over again just because I'm like, I have done this one too many times with Sanderson books in the past where like I just like didn't quite understand the magic system enough as much as I'd wanted to. And I'm like, no, this time I'm going to make sure when I go through these books, I like really get like what they're talking about and what's going on. So yeah, that for me, that's what I did. I did love the final battle though, with the painting on the ground and like warding off them.
That was cool.
I totally like figured it out just like pages before. We're just like, oh, he's going to paint them into reality. Like he's going to paint them as they are and then they'll be able to stay. Like
that's cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, I thought that was really cool too. So, did you figure out anything in the book? Like,
I actually wanted to call this out because I don't often share my misfires, but this is a book where right early I was like, this is what's gonna happen, and I was way off.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you
guess? That doesn't usually happen. My thought was that there was some connection to like there was a shard, and that shard had somehow divided into two entities, and those were the two colors of the Helion.
Oh.
And that those two colors were just like electricity, opposite charges. And since Yumi and Painter were such opposites, I was like, they are being groomed to become the Helion bands.
Oh, interesting.
Like they're going to like, I don't know whether it's like some sort of like investiture thing, but I thought they were going to become those vessels.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet.
That
could be pretty cool. But it went a completely different direction.
Next time, Sanderson. Next
time. So I was way off on that one. I think it's one of the swing and a miss.
Swing and a miss, but I think it's great though. I think that's.
I got to share the ones that I miss because when I share the ones that I absolutely nail, people are going to believe me more.
Yes, I agree. So any other thoughts before we wrap this up?
I think we need to get to a final review.
Okay, cool. So before we get there, I just want to say, so for this book. We were talking about would we recommend it to other people?
We usually end with something like that.
Yeah.
We would recommend it.
Yeah, and this is like kind of before rating though, but if I was thinking like, is this a book that I'd recommend to people? First of all, getting this book after reading some of Sanderson's earlier books was a massive fresh of breath air for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, he has just improved exponentially. Like, there's amazing amounts.
Well, we read this right after Elantris, didn't we?
His very first book to his like pretty much his most recent book. Like,
yeah, just about.
Yeah. And he's just so good with his his writing style and voice and everything. It's really great. But I think that this book is one of those books that I don't know if I could recommend it to him first, because this is a very much you have to trust Sanderson book, because it is a slow book that's slow at the beginning to a good Sanderlanche finish at the end. And if you don't trust Sanderson already, it's hard to get through a book like this. And so I always like to get him into books that like it doesn't have as much of a slow burn at the beginning, and then a great finish. But I don't know. It's the thing for me. I guess the big thing I'm trying to say is Sanderson has some books that you just got to trust him that it's going to have a great finish. And he always does, but you have to build that trust first. And I don't know if Yumi's the book to build that trust.
Interesting. I actually had a very different opinion of the main body of the story.
Really?
I thought it was one of the stronger beginning parts of the story, because there were enough like little reveals and little pieces where one person knew something the other one didn't. There was that little bit of like tension there. I thought it was great. Little reveals, little bits of information here and there.
Yeah.
But then again, I didn't like the Sanderlanche as much as this one. So
but I will have to say though, I really did like the whole book. I liked the beginning, and I liked the end.
You said it was a slow enough burn that it'd be hard to recommend.
Yeah, for me, I didn't mind the slow burn. I loved everything all the way up, but I just don't know if it'd be good for someone on their first Sanderson read.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So let's give this thing a rating. So
it needs to be done.
What would you give this book?
Well, this time I think I'm going to start with my explanation.
Okay.
I'll get to a rating.
Let's hear it.
I'm changing it up.
Let's hear it.
My explanation is this. I think overall, the elements of the story that I was able to really invest in and get benefit out of, from like morals and life and like the real struggle that they went through, I think very much juxtaposed to Elantris, where I loved the characters, but I just feel like it wasn't written as much in a way where I could connect into the story as well. I think that was stellar. I think Sanderson did a great job of that, with the characters, with the way it was narrated, with the interesting connections to the Cosmere. I think that was really cool. I think there was a little bit of a struggle for me with the Sanderlanche, just the end, with a little bit too much of confusion with reality and what's real, what isn't spirit stuff. I probably could understand it better if it on a reread, and try and get a little bit more context before getting into that type of Sanderlanche. So that definitely lost a few points for me. And then the recommendation I wanted to make sure to add in is that I would say this is really, really good as a last Cosmere book, or maybe nearer the end of your Cosmere journey, because of those things where the connections make you smile, and you miss that if you don't have that back knowledge. You can read it, but I would recommend waiting. There are lots of other great Sanderson books to read first and then end with this one. But my final rating for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is, at the end of the day, an 8.4.
Okay.
I think it was a really solid, 7 is the threshold for recommending a book. 8 is that was a really good book. 9 is this is one for the ages.
Yep.
I think it was really good. I don't think it was his best book. It wasn't, at least for me personally, but it was in the mid 8s. It was much higher than some other books that we've rated, even some other Sanderson books, and I think that's where I'm going to stay.
Okay. Well, my rating for this book is an 8.8.
Ooh.
Yeah, I really, really liked this book. From the very beginning, I was telling my wife, I was just like this book is just great. It's a Korean drama and Stranger Things. I'm like, this is awesome. I really like it. But I loved how creative the whole world was. It made me more interested, in other, just learning how about stacking rocks and other people's hobbies and how everything is art. And I just, and about Painter and coming back to learning what he's passionate about, and just those stories were amazing. I also really loved the Cosmere connections, what you were talking about. I think those were really fascinating, fun, as well as I liked the whole design thing. I love Hoyt's storytelling, which is fantastic.
So good.
Super good. I really liked the Sanderlanche finish. I thought that was great. And I loved the connections to our world, just kind of warning about like, yeah, like AI can be
Don't flip
a
the
disaster.
switch.
Yeah, be careful when you do that. So I would give this an 8.8. Really fun.
It's a really solid rating. That's good.
I think it's great. The last question I have for you is we've read all 3 secret projects now that are Cosmere related. We haven't read The Frugal Wizard. That's non-Cosmere. We'll get to it at some point. Right now we're reading through Cosmere stuff.
Oh, we've read them all.
Yes. So I will give you my rating.
Okay.
Like
your
which
rating
books.
or your ranking?
Ranking.
Okay.
Ranking.
Yep.
So for me, I don't know. Can't remember what I rated each book.
That's
put it there. But
I'm the same way.
Looking back, it's really, really hard to say this because I loved Yumi so much. But my order is, I think number 1 is Tress of the Emerald Sea, number 2 is The Sunlit Man, and number 3 is Yumi. And so I would put Yumi. It's hard because it makes it sound like I didn't like Yumi. I loved it. I loved all 3 of those books so much. But Tress is just so much fun. Every single time I think about that book and talk about that book to people, I recommend it. I think it's just a blast. The whole world, every single time I think about it, all the spores and everything, the whole adventure, so cool, so fun. Sunlit Man, the Cosmere connections are incredible. The whole like story and world is amazing. Honestly though, since it's been like a bit since I've read it, like I'm already starting to like lose like what I read on that book. And so like it comes pretty close to Yumi. But Yumi, I think, ends in last just because I just loved the Sunlit Man so much, and so I don't know. It was hard. It was a hard third for me, but it was that's my order for that.
It's tough to do rankings because you can't explain the fact that yes, it's the third one, but it's also way higher than a lot of other books that we've read. I would give it very similar. I would end probably saying Sunlit Man, Tress of the Emerald Sea, Yumi, and the Nightmare Painter.
Okay,
but it was really good. I loved the Sunlit Man. Probably one of my favorite books of the 2023 year. Yeah. But they're all so good. He's gotten so good with these books. It's like he comes out with this new backer kit for a new secret project. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to read that book. Yep. You just build that trust with the author. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I love that. So there you have it. Our rating. Do we give it a final rating? 8.6.
8.6
is the final rating.
The next chapter official rating. Yep.
It's great.
Somewhere that will be posted eventually. We'll have a next chapter little badge on all these books, and it'll say what the rating is.
And you'll be able to see it just easily. Quick reference.
Maybe we'll have the authors publish it on the back of the book.
Yeah, that's right. Next chapter rates it. Such and such.
Yeah. I mean, if they can have the New York Times on there.
That's right. That's right. Well, so if you are not already, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, comment on what you thought about Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. We're going to be doing more Cosmere in preparation for Wind and Truth. And we're really excited, getting you ready for Dragonsteel 2024.
So get ready with us. We're excited to have you on the journey, and it's going to be a fun one, which means we'll see you in the next video.